Hi, my name is Xueying Wang. In this video, I will briefly introduce the missionary work of Jesuits in China, starting from the 16th century. The first Jesuit missionary that arrived in China was Francis Xavier, one of the co-founders of the Society of Jesus. Unfortunately, Xavier fell sick and died on a small island south of the Guangdong province before he was able to enter mainland China. And after his death, the torch was then passed on to Michel Ruggieri and Matteo Ricci, who both spent a number of years studying the Chinese language and culture in Macau before they were given permission to enter mainland China. So Ricci today is most known for what we would call inculturation of Christianity in China. When Ruggieri and Ricci first entered China, they were dressed up as Buddhist bangzis and called themselves 西和尚, Western bangzis, which sounds a little bit funny to the Chinese ears of today. But slowly, Ricci realized that Confucianism could give Christianity an easier entry to the Chinese society than Buddhism. So after Ruggieri went back to Europe, Ricci changed his clothes to that of a Confucian literatus, or a Confucian scholar, as you can see here with a hat and with a robe and all, and officially changed the missionary strategy to 补儒易佛, complementing Confucianism and replacing Buddhism. So what I would like to note here is neither was Ricci the first person, nor Christianity the first religion to try to prove that they were compatible with Confucianism. When Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism entered China, they all tried to prove their compatibility with Confucianism, which was for a very long time the orthodox ideology in China. The most successful case was Buddhism. After Buddhism entered China, Buddhists quickly proposed a division of labor with the two indigenous Chinese traditions, Confucianism and Taoism, which then with time developed into the so-called 三教, three teachings. And according to the formula of 三教, Confucianism is for managing the society, Taoism is for managing the body, and Buddhism is for managing the mind-heart. So the 三教, the three teachings, are practiced by many Chinese people in an eclectic manner to this day. So with this in mind, what Matteo Ricci was proposing was essentially to replace Taoism and Buddhism in the division of labor with Confucianism. And to be sure, Ricci was a missionary, and his ultimate goal in seeking to prove the compatibility of Christianity and Confucianism is to evangelize. However, I would like to argue that Ricci's adaptation is not without principle. So at Ricci's time, the form of Confucianism that was most popular and most widely accepted in circles of intellectuals was the New Confucianism, represented by the famous Chinese philosopher Zhu Xi. But Ricci acutely realized that despite its popularity, New Confucianism could not be a great ally to Christianity because of the content of its teaching. So what he sought to adapt Christian messages to is the classical Confucianism, the Confucianism as found in Confucian canons, the 4 books and the 5 classics, which was believed to be composed in ancient times by Confucian sages. And in this famous book, 天主实义, the true meaning of the Lord of Heaven, Ricci argues that Confucian canons taught that there is a supreme deity called Tian, translated as heaven, ruling over the cosmos, who is, of course, the equivalent of the Christian God. And according to Ricci, the Confucian sages already taught that Tian created the world and punishes the wicked and rewards the righteous with eternal life. Thus, Christianity is essentially in harmony with Confucian canons, except that it is more detailed and provides supplementation to the Confucian canons, which are oftentimes vague and fragmented. So we could certainly say that Ricci has stretched or at least overinterpreted ancient Confucian canons, but his interpretation could also be a legitimate reading of the Confucian canons. In any event, he successfully convinced a number of Chinese literati, scholars who were most conversant with the traditional Confucian literature, that Ricci interpreted Confucius' works most faithfully and even more faithful, represented the Orthodox Confucian tradition more faithful than the Chinese philosopher Zhu Xi did. So out of respect, the Confucian literati or scholars called Ricci the Xizhu Western Confucian. Although the number of converts were not very many, among the converts were prominent scholars and high-ranked officials, such as Xu Guangqi, Yang Tingyun, and Li Zhizao, who later then became the three pillars of the fledgling church, Christian church in China. So this is a picture of Ricci and famous convert Xu Guangqi. This is supposedly Ricci's residence in Beijing. And Ricci was invited by the emperor to serve at his court and for astronomical matters and making calendars. So Ricci successfully established a Christian circle in China, and his missionary strategies were most impactful. So later Jesuits largely followed his accommodationist policy in China. Ricci's missionary work was without challenges. When Franciscan and Dominican missionaries also entered China, they considered the use of tian, heaven, as reference to God to be idolatrous. And more importantly, they challenged the Jesuits' tolerance of Chinese Catholics continuing to make sacrifices in honor of Confucius and the ancestors. So they deemed this as superstitious and idolatrous. So the Jesuits, in response, defended their accommodationist policies, and both sides sent delegates to Rome to make their cases. And Rome at that time lacked firsthand information about what was going on in China, and they made policies, contradicting policies back and forth, sometimes in favor of the Jesuits, and then a few years later in favor of the Dominican orders. And finally, in 1742, Pope Benedict XIV issued Ex Quo Singulari, which forbade Chinese Catholics to participate in any form of ceremonies in honor of Confucius and ancestors. So as a consequence, Christianity was banned in China, partially as a consequence of this, because actually it was required by law for Chinese citizens to perform sacrifice in honor of the ancestors, and for the literati to make sacrifices in honor of Confucius. So partially as a consequence of this, Christianity became a legal religion in China. But I want to pause here and and I want to say that I don't want to leave the impression that the Jesuits were the good guys and then Dominicans were the bad guys in Christianity in China. So from today's vantage point, we could say that, well, it's fairly clear that the Jesuits were right at the time. But at that time, it was not clear. So both sides had their different theological concerns. But anyways, in the 2 centuries that followed this papal decree in 1742, the number of converts precipitated, and the missionary work, to a large extent, came to a stop. And this papal decree was not lifted until 1939, which was 2 centuries later. And despite all this, I would like to end my introduction with a hopeful note. Although the number of converts had largely ceased to grow, many Catholic communities persisted despite persecution and hardships. And at times of severe persecution, they were willing to sacrifice their wealth and risk their lives to rescue priests who were arrested. And sometimes they had to sacrifice their lives too. Many Catholic villages who were evangelized by the missionaries in the 17th and 18th century remain active Catholic communities to this day.